Hi everyone, happy Halloween. Hope everyone is doing well on this fine Saturday afternoon, blue moon. I hope everyone else is in costume too. I was trying to think of some sort of detective. Hi Marty, hi Andrew, hi Tashina. And then I started thinking about all the people from Scooby-Doo, and I tried to recruit the whole staff here to like dress up as the whole gang, but apparently I was not convincing enough. So, and I had all this stuff except for the glasses. And I don't know how long I'm gonna be able to wear these because they're sort of driving me crazy. But you know, it's Halloween, we gotta dress up. If you guys are in costume doing this tasting, you should definitely take a picture and tag it because I love seeing everyone's costumes. Hi Amber, hi Sean, hi Jonathan. We had sort of a fun, exciting week here because we finally got our patio up. Yay! I mean, the patio had been up, but the cover and the heating and the lights and all those fun winterizing perks basically the tent had been back ordered from, it wasn't back ordered, let me rephrase. FedEx lost it. And then kept saying it was going to be delivered, and it wasn't, and it was 2 very stressful weeks, but it's now up, and it's super cute. I think I posted a picture on our Instagram yesterday, maybe, but it's very cozy. It's covered on 3 sides, but open on one of the long sides, so it gets good airflow, and there are heaters. We got all heaters have been sold out in Oregon, so my parents were so sweet. They've been helping build the whole thing, and they drove like 2 hours up to Washington to get 3 heaters that still existed up there. So yeah, it's exciting. And if you're around tonight and don't have a raging Halloween party to go to, which I hope you don't, then come on in. We're doing a special Corpse Reviver cocktail because that's on brand. And we also have some hot cocktails that Chris whipped up for the winter, and one of them is like it's like a cross between a pumpkin spice latte and a hot buttered rum. It's pretty decadent, but it's very, very good. We also have like a toddy that we can make with tequila or bourbon or anything like that. Oh, good! I'm glad you've been in. Yay! Yeah, it's really cozy out there. I'm very pleased with it. Trying to think what other housekeeping things I can mention before we get going. Patio's open, Halloween, some specialty cocktails. Oh, some of you have asked, we are gonna be open on election day. I know there's like talk of protests, but we figure like during service we should be fine. Hi Greg. And so we're gonna be open. We have a feeling it'll probably be a takeout heavy night, but we'll be here cooking up takeout. So if you want some comfort food while you watch everything go down, then we can provide that for you. And we're not planning on boarding up. We're just going to see what happens and sort of make a plan as we go. And then, I'll mention this at the end as well, but in case you can't stay till the very end, the tasting lineup for November is next week is going to be the Canary Islands, which I'm really excited about. Basically, it's going to be 3 wines. I don't think we've done a 3 wine day in a really long time, but it's going to be 3 wines, a red, a white, and a rosé from 3 different Canary Islands. And I'm really excited. The Canary Islands have some of the craziest, most dramatic looking wine regions that it's these black volcanic soils, and you have to dig a little crater for each vine, and it looks like it's on another planet. So that's going to be a really fun one. And then I'm going to do the blind tasting the 2nd week of November because since I'm putting things in half bottles, I'm conscious of because we have to open the bottle and split it, I don't necessarily want something to be open and then put in a bottle like for the whole month. I'd rather have you guys drink it sooner. So I know it'll be 2 blind tastings sort of close together, but we should all be fine. And then the 3rd week is going to be Tuscany, which I'm really excited about. We're going to do a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and then we're going to do a Rosso de Montepulciano, or I'm sorry, a Vino Nobile de Montepulciano. So it's actually 2 different varietals, which we'll learn about. And then last week is going to be Gruner Veltliner, and we're going to do one from Austria and one from the Columbia Gorge in Washington. So it should be a fun lineup. I'm nailing down December's as well, hopefully pretty soon, in case you want to have some fun holiday plans. Yeah. Oh, good, Tashina. I'm glad you're excited about Tuscany and all of it. Yeah, I'm excited about Tuscany too. We did a Chianti blind tasting one time, but that was it. So I guess we can start to get rolling. Hopefully you have the two wines. We have number 1 and we have number 2. So hopefully you have those 2 bottles. I sort of love this because now I'm like, oh, no one can like peek or see the cork or get any spoilers. So it's truly blind. Not that I didn't trust all of you in the meantime, but, I know a lot of you have probably heard me say this, so I'm just going to do like the quick version in case this is someone's first blind tasting. But the reason why we do blind tasting is to connect the knowledge in our brain to the sensations on our palate and the nose, sort of just the senses in general, because you can be really book smart about wine, but unless you can recognize those bits of knowledge and, oh, what high acidity is and that particular grape has it, or this one has lower tannin, until you can like sense that and tie that knowledge together, it's not really like a complete experience. So this way of blind tasting is called the deductive tasting method, and it's basically going from we're going reverse. Instead of saying, oh, we're going to learn about this region and all of the characteristics of the grape, and then we're going to taste it. We're doing the opposite. We're starting with a wine we don't know, and we're gathering clues like a detective to deduce what the wine is. So what you don't want to do today, or what I would prefer if you didn't do, is start immediately trying to guess what the wine is. Because even if you're spot on, or if you're not, this is really a practice in training your palate. So even if you're super smart and guess what it is, please keep it to yourself until we ask for guesses at the end, because then someone else is getting the shortcut and they're not learning how to connect those tasting notes. And if you start thinking, oh, this must be this particular thing, then your brain's going to start convincing yourself that that's what it is, even if the clues don't lead you that way. So rather, we want to gather all the different clues from sight, from smell, from taste, and then at the very end, we want to look back at those clues and say, okay, this could mean this could mean this, this could mean this, and therefore, here's what I think it might be. Okay, so let's put wine number 1 in our glass and just get started. And they should be fairly different in style. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to put a little more so you can see it a little better. So start telling me, we're going to start with sight. So start telling me what you are noticing visually on the wine. What is the hue of the color? Is it, let's see if I can hold it up here. You can't see as well, you can sort of see. What's the color? Is it more ruby? Does it have more like purpley tints to it? Does it have more of like a brick? Oh, as I said, brick, I saw Andrew's comment. Yeah, I rust color, those are both great descriptors. Brick, rust, it seems to be like this ruby color with it leans a little more towards like this tawny hue rather than like a bright purple or a bright red. Which right off the bat, what could that be a clue to? It could be indicative of the grape varietal itself, or it could maybe be a clue to something else. So let me know what you think that is. Tashina says seems a little lighter. Yeah, so just judging by like the body itself, and like how, is it fairly transparent? Like, can you see through it, or is it a little more opaque? Does it seem a little fuller or denser? What are you guys noticing there? Tashina says it seems a little lighter, which I would sort of agree with. And again, if something age, yeah. So back to the color thing, that's exactly right, Greg. If a wine has less of the brightness and a little more of that like faded, rusty, tawny kind of color, it could be in the varietal itself. Or it could be a clue to age, because as a wine ages, like the bright kind of juiciness fades off and it gets a little more of this kind of faded color. And Tashina said it seems lighter. One thing that we haven't mentioned is rim variation, just from looking at it. Rim variation means, a lot of you know this, but how much does the color of the wine vary from the outside of the rim to the very center of the wine. And Marty says not a lot of rim variation. So because the wine is a lighter color in general, you're right. It's not like it's super dark and dense in the middle and then very light at the edge. It's fairly light throughout, but I would definitely say that there is some rim variation present. If you see how watery it is towards the edge, and then it has that sort of like light, again, like light brick color, and then it gets a little more ruby. I think there's definitely some rim variation present, but I think maybe it's hard to detect because the wine is lighter overall. And yeah, Andrew, you're right. It is pretty clear at the edge. And you know, you can see through it pretty well. Like I can see the lettering on the page through it. Let's look at the legs or the tiers and tell me how quickly they are forming. I really wish you could see the legs. I can never see them on there. What do you guys think? How fast are they moving, and what would your guesses be as to alcohol level? I wish there wasn't this silly delay. Tashina says slowly. Yeah, mine are moving fairly slowly. I would agree with that. Yeah. They're slow to form and they're slow to move down the glass. So as you guys know, that's probably a clue to either sugar content or higher alcohol. That's what would make the legs move slowly. So already we have some clues before we move to the nose. Just from looking at it, without smelling it, without tasting it, we think that it might have some age to it. It looks slightly lighter in body, but that could also be due to age. We don't quite know yet. We don't know what the tannin level is, so we might not start thinking of specific varietals yet. But it looks like it has at least a little bit of age to it. And it's probably, unless it's an odd sweet red wine, unless it's a dessert wine, then it's probably something with a little higher alcohol, which would mean, as you can probably guess, that it's probably from maybe a warmer region, or was grown in a region where at least it got a lot of sun exposure. Okay, so let's get to the nose. So let's smell it and start telling me what you are detecting on the nose. Fruit characters, earth characters, how intense the smells are, etc., etc. I tried to give you two pretty different wines, so we'll see if it ended up as I hoped. Tashina says leather. That's an excellent tasting note. What else are you guys smelling? Yeah, absolutely. If anyone knows how to somehow get better Instagram where the comments pop up immediately, that would be amazing. Nicole also says leather. I love it. Dark cherry, yeah, so for a fruit component, I feel like this wine has a lot of, I don't know how to do this because it's not my own hair. There's hair in my eyes. Fruit leather, there we go, we've combined them. So I was just gonna say there's a strong fruit component as well as this non-fruit category. Oh cool, all these comments are popping in now. So leather, dark cherry, fruit leather, dried fruit, absolutely, you guys are spot on. So there's sort of, like you said, dark cherry. I would definitely say the fruit seems blackish. It's not like a light, it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's not like blueberry, or it's less fresh and juicy, I guess, to me. It has this more dried quality to it. Dark cherry is a great component. What other fruits are we getting? I kind of get almost fig, or maybe some kind of raisinated, dried plums or something like that, which are prunes. So prune or dried fig. Leather. What else? Are we getting any oak aromas? Anything that would hint at oak? Any spices, either from the oak or from the wine itself? It has this very like blackberry. That's a great one. Yep, yep. Sometimes people will use this term to describe wines, which I think this wine sort of reflects well, which is barnyard, which can sound sort of gross. But if you've ever walked into like a horse barn and you get that leather smell right away and that dust and kind of like animal sweat and animal hair, that probably sounds super gross. But I love the smell of like walking into a barn, and I feel like this has this kind of component to it where it's not stinky, but it's got this like very rustic smell. A little baking spice, yeah. I think there's not a ton of spice. I get a little bit of like, currants, a little bit of like clove or anise or something, but it doesn't have much of like that sweet baking spice smell, which would tell us that if we're not getting a lot of it, then there might not be a lot of oak on it, or maybe because of the age, like the oak character has been pretty well integrated to where you're not tasting it. You know, sometimes you taste wine and you immediately get that kind of like sweet cinnamon clove, which you're like, okay, that's oak. Absolutely with you on the barn, aka rustic. Yeah, and you know, this is a wine that will tell you about your palate, whether you enjoy this style of wine or not. I like these kind of rustic style wines, but I know they're not everyone's cup of tea. You know, if you're used to like a more juicy, fruity style. Hay, straw smell. Yeah, so Kyle, yeah, absolutely. When I think of like that barnyard thing, I think of like all the stuff that would be in a barn, which is like the dust, the wood, the straw or the hay. There's like manure in there, there's leather, all these sort of like rustic, animalistic, kind of like savory smells. And hay would definitely be like a component of that. And just like the smell of like dirt itself too. Maybe this isn't sounding very appetizing, but okay. So we have some red fruit as well as like a little bit of blackberry, not a whole lot of the oak sort of smells, not a whole lot of baking spice, definite earthy component. So right off the bat, I mean, it hasn't told us a whole ton of clues that we could gather, but you know, in general, if we think, you know, we talk about old world versus new world, which one of those would these smells lead you to believe that this would be from? And again, I'm trying we shouldn't jump ahead of ourselves too much, but that's a pretty general category that we could start considering at this point. Like, okay, if I'm not getting a ton of like fruity sweet smells and I'm getting more of those like rustic savory smells, we could maybe safely assume that it would be at least stereotypically more in the old world family. Granted, it could be a new world wine that someone's just doing a real good job of like making a wine in that old world style, but in general, this is sort of representative, these smells of like that typical old world, earthier, more rustic sort of style. Okay, so now let's move on to the palate. Let's taste this thing. Mm-hmm. Nicole says old world. Yeah, exactly. So talk to me about what you're tasting. Is the palate confirming what you smelled on the nose? Are there flavors that you're picking up? So flavors, and then what's the body like? We'll get to acidity and tannin in a second. But talk to me about if it's full or light bodied, and what the flavors are. Well, and Andrew is on top of it before I even said that. Yes, it's acidic and it's tannic. Yeah, both of those things are present as well. I guess just notes on anything we're sensing on the palate then. So Sheena says, I thought it would be really tannic, but it's a lot of acid. Yeah, you know, so I guess let's talk about, it is fairly acidic. So how much is your mouth watering afterwards? I would say this isn't as acidic as maybe like a Chablis or some like really sharp white wines that we've had, but there is a fair amount of acidity in there. I would say like medium plus. And so Kyle says almost like briny or minerally. Yeah, I would say there's this very like savory component to it. And yeah, I think briny is a good way to describe it. It's not like salty, but it has this sort of like, yeah, like olive brine or, like tangy, savory thing. And the mineral component could be from the soils. We don't necessarily know what the soils were like, but maybe it came from soils that had like a strong like stone, like limestone or chalk component. Lighter in body, medium high acid. Yep, you guys are spot on all of those things. And in terms of the body, so we can say, so here's something we've noticed so far, which is that the legs were moving really slowly. So it probably has a higher alcohol, so it probably is from maybe a warmer region, although we think it's probably old world. So old world, either warmer region or somewhere with a good amount of sun exposure, but it has a good amount of acidity as well. So those are all sort of clues that we're, logging in our brains. Definitely still dried fruit, like stewed prunes. Yeah. And so here's another clue to the climate. If we're detecting fruit that the quality of the fruit seems dried or stewed, and like you guys are saying, fruit leather, like dried fruit, again, that's probably a clue that maybe this is from a hotter region, that the grapes are getting pretty ripe. So far we're thinking hotter region, old world. There is that high acid component, but that could just be intrinsic to the grape itself, or it could be somewhere that has cold nights. And to Andrew's comment about lighter body, so it's probably a grape varietal that isn't super, super full bodied to begin with. But if we're thinking that there's age on it as well, we have to take into account that it could be a grape that, depending on how long it's been aged, lost some of that body and lightened up a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind too, depending on how old we think it maybe is. And then tannins. Do you guys have any other thoughts? I think Andrew said it is pretty tannic. How would you guys describe the tannins? Like, do they feel the same as like a big, ripe, young, say, I don't want to like name a varietal, but you know the wines I'm talking about. They're like big, bold, juicy, very dry, sort of like coat your teeth. And I would say that these tannins are present, but they're a little bit different. Like, how would you guys describe how they feel? Let me taste it again. They're definitely there. But I would say they are a little bit more delicate, or they're not necessarily soft. They're like more like delicate, dry tannins. Pretty balanced tannins. Yeah, I would say the wine's definitely in balance. It has good acid, it has good tannic structure. But when we taste tannins like that, that do seem like they just don't seem as forceful. They're present, but they don't like knock the enamel off your teeth. Again, that could be a clue to age. So when a wine ages, yes, the color falls out of it, so it makes the body seem a little bit lighter, changes the hue to the color. The fruit gets a little more faded off. You get these more savory notes that come out more. And the tannins soften up a little bit. They kind of lose some of their power and just seem a little bit lighter. Kyle says not high tannin. I believe a younger bottle of this would be higher tannin. Yes, that's a great, excellent point. That's sort of what I was trying to get at, which is that maybe we could safely assume that when this wine was younger, the fruit would be a little bit more intense. We'd get a little less of like the leather, the earth. We'd get more of that like, dark cherry and blackberry. The tannins would be a little bit stronger. The color would be a little bit brighter. In terms of like, well, I guess the finish, that's more of a question of like quality. Like, does it last in your mouth a long time? Does it seem complex? Does it feel like there's a good amount going on? Oh, good. Hi, Noma. Very smooth just during the tasting. Yeah, I think the overall, reception of the wine now, depending on how old it is, maybe when it was younger, it could have been bigger, bolder, drier. But now it is like a little bit more subtle, a little bit smoother. So let's think of all the clues we've had so far. We saw that the legs were slow moving. we think that it's higher alcohol. We saw that the color's a little faded. We think it's a little older. We smell these more savory smells, which could be another clue to age, that the fruit has faded a little bit, but it could also mean that it's more of an old world style. We're thinking for the varietal itself that it probably was higher tannin, but now in its age, it's backed off a little bit. So we're thinking, I guess, if it sounds good to you guys, we're thinking old world, warmer climate, a varietal that has fairly high tannin to begin with, and we're thinking how old it might be. So do you guys have any clues or any guesses now? I just saw Greg send me a private message with some kind of guess, but Greg, I can't open it right now because I'm live streaming. So you'll have to, now you can input your guesses. So maybe what regions do we think it could be from? Any countries or regions come to mind? In terms of just the overall smell and flavors, are there any regions that particularly it seems like, I think something in the south of Europe, yeah, that would make sense. So Europe is going to be more old world. That's what we sort of mean when we say old world, is on the European continent, and the higher alcohol and the riper fruit would be clues to being somewhere closer to the equator. Sarah says, but not coastal. Interesting. Why do you say that? Noma says Italy, but Italy always comes to my mind. Noma drinks a lot of Italian wine. Yeah, so let's think of, what are European countries that are closer to the equator? Parts of Italy for sure. We've tasted, Greece is down there. There's southern Spain. Although southern Spain, they're definitely making red wine there, but it's more known for like sherry. Could be France, although the southern part of France isn't, it's still not as close to the equator as some of the other regions we mentioned. Any other guesses? Let's see. So we've had, and Sarah said not coastal, and I'm curious to why you said that. Oh, and one thing I should mention before, I think it was Kyle said it had a sort of brininess to it, and someone else said that it had a nice mineral component. Maybe it was also Kyle. So we could be thinking somewhere with like more chalky, like rocky soils. I think of coastal being more temperate, but that's not necessarily true everywhere. Just thinking of the coast here. Yeah, that's a really good point. Unless it was a region with a hotter region on the coast. So remember Croatia would be a really good guess. I don't know if I can't remember what class it was where we were talking about this, but if you have a really hot climate and you want to make good wine, it was last week for South Africa. Do you remember what the two things your two options as a winemaker? If it's a hot region and you want to be able to have acidity in your wine, you basically have two options. You have to plant high up so that you can get cooler nights and cooler temperatures, or you have to go close to the coast so you can get cooling breezes that come off of the ocean. So if we're thinking Southern Europe, close to the equator, I guess I can just go ahead and reveal it to you because you guys are spot on. This is from Southern Italy. This is from Puglia. So I don't have my handy dandy map here, but Puglia is exactly. So Puglia is the heel of the boot in Italy. Can you talk more about what complexity means? I guess that this is needlessly complex. Yeah, I will touch back on that in just a second. Because it's a great question. But so this is from Puglia, and I am annoyed at myself because I bottled these up a month ago. I didn't remember to keep the bottles, so I'm really sorry. I'm gonna have to tell you what they are so you can look up the picture of the bottles. So Greg guessed Older Sangiovese, and that's a really good guess, and I think that's probably where Noma's mind was going too. Sangiovese has that like red fruit component, but that really like dusty, savory undertone. And Nero d'Avola, that's another great guess. And honestly, I didn't expect you guys to be able to guess this varietal itself. I sort of wanted this to be an exercise in the style and like looking at the age, guessing the region. So this is a grape called Negro Amaro. So Negro Amaro, and I don't expect, Negro Amaro is sort of the king grape of like Puglia, sort of even, oh God, what is Salento a little bit? It's grown there. Negro Amaro and Primitivo are sort of the big grapes down there, and it's indigenous. It grew native in Salento and in Puglia for thousands of years. I think the Greeks planted it a long time ago there. And when it's younger, Negro Amaro, Negro means black, and Amaro, as we know, are the sort of digestifs there, but it actually means bitter in Italian. So bitter and dark. And that's sort of what the grape is indicative of when it's younger. In its age, it fades off a little bit and it gets a little more savory. There's still that sort of herbal component. How old would you guys guess this grape is? And now that we know sort of the climate down there, oh good, no, I'm glad you're having fun. So that we can sort of picture the climate. It is hot and it's arid. It's right at the edge of the heel of the boot, and it's right across from Croatia. So Tišina, that was an awesome guess. But it's close to like the Greek islands. And it's actually one of the only places that I've spent time in Italy. And I just remember being shocked by how dry and arid and hot it was. It's all like scrubby olive trees. It's a very coastal region. So Sarah, you were right to think that, in cooler climates that it can be a little more temperate because this area is so hot. The ocean helps, the Adriatic helps cool it and give a little acidity to those grapes. So Sarah says she thinks it's 5+ years. Yes, that is correct. Any other guesses? How much more than 5 years do we think it is? These particular winemakers, because Negro Amaro is such a full-bodied and fairly dry, kind of big grape when it's young, this is actually the current release of the wine. Wait, see if anyone has any other guesses. And so that's why that brininess, I think that comes from like growing pretty close to the ocean. You get those cool ocean breezes, you get that sea salt, you get that kind of like, just oceanic quality in the wine. And the soils are limestone, the really old calcareous soils. So it's thin layer of clay with like a bunch of limestone underneath. So it does give that kind of mineral component. So yes, it is exactly 10 years old. Spot on, Noma. This is a 2010 Negro Amaro from Salento, which is the little sub-region in Puglia, in southern Italy. Yep, Tišina, you were spot on. Hi, Erica. And so, yes, it's made by a cooperative that's been around since the 1930s. Those are still fairly common in parts of Italy. And they make only indigenous varietals, Negro Amaro, Malvasia, Primitivo, and this is their current release. So they are specifically trying to make a style that they think this is the way the grape is intended to be enjoyed, that it is sort of like big and burly when it's younger, and they're looking to make like a smoother, earthier, lighter style of wine. And so there's actually no oak on it, which you guys were spot on as well. It goes into stainless steel, and then it stays, I think, in stainless steel for like a year or two, and then it goes in the bottle, and they don't release it for 10 years. So I thought this was a fun way to try a really old wine. It would be interesting, I'll tell you right now, I didn't give you the same wine. It would be interesting to taste like the same wine at like one or 2 years old, just to taste what it does. But I think this is a great example of what a 10-year-old wine tastes like, where the fruit's faded, you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste the tannins, the body is softer, etc., etc. And it's a great example of like an old world style. So I hope you guys had fun with it. In terms of pairings, is there anything that you guys would think to pair this with? If you bought this one, if you bought this one now, how long would it age? You mean how much longer would it age, like past 10 years? I sort of think that this is like primo drinking area for this wine. I think if you aged it too much longer, you would lose any fruit. Like the fruit is sort of hanging in there, but it's predominantly those like more savory, earthy, rustic characters. And I think if you waited another 5 years, it would be hard to pick up on the fruit. So you could I probably wouldn't age it more than another 5 years, I guess would be the answer. It has acid and tannin, but again, because it's such a hot region, and I should say this Negro Amaro has adapted for thousands of years to the hot region, and it does a good job of keeping the acidity. Sometimes if you take like Bordeaux varietals and plant them in a really hot region, because they haven't adapted over thousands of years, it's hard to retain acidity. And because this is indigenous, it's sort of adapted. But it's not overly acidic and it's not overly tannic, so I don't think you could age it much longer than that. Focaccia, yeah, lamb meatballs, absolutely. You could have this with sort of more like traditional Italian, like red sauce. I'll tell you, I was surprised when I was in Puglia. The food is very simple there, very fresh. It's like spicy arugula, tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, fresh pasta, and then actually a lot of seafood because they're right on the ocean. So like grilled fish. They even ate a lot of like, they would do sort of like a salmon carpaccio with like salmon, lemon, have it with arugula, tomatoes. So even a red wine like this could go with kind of more what we would think of for white wine foods. But the spiciness in this and the acidity still work with foods like that. Okay, I always think I'm not gonna have material to fill an hour with blind tastings, but here we are running late again. So let's do wine number 2. Hope you guys like this. Wine 2. Let's put it, actually, I'm going to do a little rinse on mine because that wine was so savory. Okay. I have to work tonight, so I'm spitting my wine right now. Okay. So let's jump into wine 2. Let's put it in the glass and start back over with sight. So tell me right away what you're noticing about the color, the body. Is it transparent? Is it opaque? What do the legs look like? Everything visual. Start telling me what you're noticing. It should already look really different right off the bat. Wish you could. Ooh, you can sort of see the legs if I do this. Let's see. Never tried this. Maybe not so well. A little bit. Purple red, more opaque. Yep, exactly. The color seems to have less of the like tawny, orangey, kind of bricky notes and lean more towards the purple side. You guys are spot on. Marty also says purple, opaque. Yeah, the legs. Oh, I forgot to say, the alcohol on wine 1 was 13.8. So fairly high. Deep, rich ruby. Yeah, absolutely. Has that red kind of core with like slight purpley hints to it. Yeah, and the legs are moving a little bit quicker here, but they still look thick to me, but just not as slow. But they look fairly viscous. Do you guys notice how this seems to have like a little more like inkiness to it? Like it kind of stains the glass a little bit more. Well, and so I guess let's look at the rim variation on here. You know, if we think about the last wine that we had as having a good amount of rim variation. Well, and actually maybe I'm doing a bad job of explaining rim variation. So when we say rim variation, we're really, instead of looking just at the sort of edge right where the wine meets the glass, we're really considering sort of like from the center of the wine, if you're looking at the pool of wine, from the center of the wine out to the rim. So is the color consistent from the center out to the edge? So if you look at just the edge itself, you're right, Andrew, there's not much, there's a little bit like right on the edge, like they call it a watery meniscus, which is a fancy way of saying that it goes to clear right at the edge. So if you look at just that couple centimeters, there is a lot of variation. But if you look at it to the center, whereas the last wine, I feel like changed a lot. It was like red in the middle, it kind of went to like a brown, and then it went almost to like a light, yellowy kind of color, and then it went clear. This one seems fairly consistent from the center all the way out to like, a centimeter from the edge, and then it changes. So I would say that there's less rim variation in this if we're looking at it all the way to the center. The color is just more consistent. So that would probably be a clue to maybe a younger wine. And the brightness of the color would point to that as well. It's less faded and it has those more purpley colors, which is what grape juice looks like when it's very young. It's bright, it's vibrant, it's kind of purpley, and then as it ages, those colors kind of fade off and you get those more brickish, orangey brown kind of colors. Yeah, and the legs they're like thicker, but they are moving a little faster. They're thick, but they're moving faster. Okay, so we're thinking younger wine, fuller body, it looks like. And again, we're not quite sure on the region yet, but just based on like the legs. So let's smell it and tell me what you're noticing in terms of fruit components, earth components, possible oak usage, anything that you're getting on the nose. Make sure I remember the stats on this wine correctly. Should have a fairly different aroma to it. Does it smell savory? Does it smell sweeter? Is it more red fruits? Is it more black fruits? Are there herbs? Are there floral components? Ripe fruit, grape juice. Yeah, so it does have that kind of like grapey smell, which again could maybe, if you smell that on a wine, it sort of might mean that it's younger, that like juicy kind of smell. Maybe blackberry. Yep, blackberry is sort of like the predominant tasting smell that I would get on here. Very curious about this wine based on color. We'll find out. Raspberry. Yeah, I definitely get that sort of like blackberry, boysenberry, marionberry, like fresh berry smells. Anything else in terms of like non-fruit smells? You know, whereas on the last one we were getting that kind of like leather, barnyardy kind of smell. What else are we getting on this wine? Anise, yeah, that's a really great tasting note. I definitely think there's this sort of like, I mean, anise like the spice, but also this kind of like sweet black licorice smell, like one of those things of black licorice sticks. Maybe a little herbaceous like thyme. Yeah, I think there is some like, as opposed to in the last one where I would maybe say there was like dried herbs. These ones almost smell more like fresh herbs to me, if that makes sense. Hey, Michael, how are you? Does anyone get like a dark chocolate or a coffee kind of note, like when you grind coffee beans? It's that kind of like dark, bittersweet kind of smell. And you do that, for me it smells sweeter. I don't know if it's going to taste sweeter, but it smells, and you said the fruit does smell ripe. It definitely does smell ripe. Fresh fennel, the anise family fresh fennel. Yeah, that's a great tasting note as well. I could see like Ethiopian natural wash. You are clearly more of a coffee connoisseur than I am. If anyone knows where to take coffee classes, I would love to do that. I could not tell you the smell between different types of coffee. Yeah, I got the chocolate a little bit, like dark chocolate. Absolutely, not like a light milk chocolate, but like that really dark kind of like bittersweet smell. Are we smelling things that might point to oak? Are we smelling baking spices, either European or American oak? Are we smelling cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, vanilla, coffee and cherries? Yeah, almost like dark chocolate covered cherries or coffee beans. Madagascar chocolate with the fruity notes. I love it. It sounds delicious. It'll probably be really good with this wine. And so in terms of, I think it was Sarah said, it smells like riper fruit. Yeah, I would say that it doesn't, even though we're getting some like herbaceous notes, for me it doesn't smell like underripe fruit. Like, you know, so when you smell, I keep using the Chablis example, but it smells like kind of like fresh picked green apples. I definitely do think the fruit smells a little riper. Not dried and leathery like the last one, but almost like a little bit jammy or a little bit riper. Not a ton of spice. Yeah, I mean, I think when you smell those kind of sweeter notes, maybe it doesn't specifically come across as like cinnamon or clove, but there's something on here, and maybe it could come down to those chocolatey notes. I think there might be a little bit of oak on here. And I'm not trying to like give it away by any means, but I think even like the coffee and chocolate and like Andrew said, a little bit of vanilla, it doesn't necessarily always have to be cinnamon and clove, but when you get those sort of non-fruit smells, like coffee, like chocolate, like vanilla, then those sometimes could be a clue to a certain type of oak as well. Based on that, are we thinking European or American oak? Like the berries you picked a few days ago now need to go in a pie. Yeah, absolutely. Where they're like ripe fruit. They're not yet like cooked, but they're pretty ripe. It's a great way to describe it. Okay, so if the fruit is ripe, we're probably thinking warm-ish climate, and also based on what we're looking at, even though the legs move quicker, they still look pretty thick for me. So I would think like fuller-bodied varietal, maybe a warm-ish climate, at least warm enough to ripen the grapes. And Sarah says European oak. Yeah, so I think I would agree that the notes we're getting from the oak don't hit you over the nose with like coconut or buttered, popcorn or something. Like they're definitely a little more subtle. But if we're smelling this one compared to the wine we just smelled, which smelled so savory and so earthy, and we sort of could categorize that as a old world style smell, based on the nose of this, would you immediately think New World or Old World? If the predominant smells that we were getting were like ripe fruit. And I think we probably need to taste it first, but I guess you could sort of be going either way at this point. But if you smell fruit that's this prominent, again, maybe not jammy, but ripe, yeah, I would think New World as well, Noah. Okay, so let's taste this one. Yeah, new. You guys are so good. Ripe fruit to me indicates New World, absolutely. But see, it is interesting because we just tasted a hot region from an Old World, and there is a kind of difference. Even though we think they might be both warm climates, the nose is just a little different, and it could be down to oak, it could be down to the varietal, we're not quite sure yet. So let's taste it and start talking to me about what you're tasting in terms of flavors, what the acidity feels like, what the tannins feel like, any new flavors you're getting. And I will get back to your complexity question, Andrew. I promise I haven't forgotten. Dried my mouth out completely. Let's taste this. Yep, there are tannins there. Reminds me of Australian, but maybe that's too warm. Well, Australia has a fair amount of wine regions, so that could be a great guess. Absolutely. Australia is definitely in that New World family. And just a reminder, if you don't know what we mean by New World, it's basically everything that's not Europe. So it could be South Africa, it could be Australia, it could be New Zealand, Southern Hemisphere, basically all of the Americas. So Oregon, California, Washington, Chile, Argentina, etc. Yes, tannins, high tannins for sure. And do you feel that like in the other wine with the tannins, they were a little more delicate? Like we could feel that they were there, but they sort of like touched you and then like gently faded away. Whereas these, they kind of like hang on to your teeth. They're kind of like, you can feel them there. And there's acidity as well, yeah. And often it's hard to like pull the two apart, separate them, because if the sensation of tannin is so high, it sometimes is hard to detect acidity. But I definitely think there's a good amount of acid here too. Medium plus acidity. I got more of the oak on the palate and in the feel of the body. Yeah, I think that you're definitely, they're that kind of sweet, yeah, like, I don't know if it's baking spice, could be like, almost like I think of like the pumpkin spice blend as sort of like baking spices, which has nutmeg, clove, cinnamon, I don't even know what else is in there. But there is a little bit of that in there, where there's not sugar in the wine, but it does taste a little sweet, and often that's an indicator of oak. I'd say a pairing wine for me. Yeah, agreed. It's big and dry on its own. The chocolate comes through. Yeah, again, and I think that comes down to the oak. So we're thinking maybe, because we're running out of time. So what are the clues we've gathered so far? Fuller bodied wine with dry tannins, pretty high acidity. We think it's more in a New World style, but we think it probably uses European oak. We think it's probably a fairly warm region in order to ripen a full-bodied varietal like this, but there's still a good amount of acidity. So based on what we said for the other one, if you're in a warm climate and ripening a full-bodied wine and you want acidity, what are the two things you should do? Go to the ocean or grow up high. So maybe it's one of those things. No oiliness like we've had in previous tastings. That's good. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is definitely a big dry wine, but I think it's nicely balanced. I really love this wine. I've known this wine for a long time, and even though it's not like my go-to to drink big dry wines, I think for people that do love that style, and when there's a time and place for it, when you have food that you really want something big and dry, I think this is a great example of it. I think it has ripe fruit, it has a lot of acid, I think it has a lot of tannin, but they're all in balance. Okay, so if we're thinking New World regions, what are we thinking? What are some options for regions? Warmer climate, warmer varietal, but somewhere either up high or next to the ocean where they can get some acidity. Do we have guesses on varietals or regions? Noma said Australia, which is a really good guess. If it was Australia, what varietals would we be thinking? You know, as a general rule, Australia is sort of known for GSM blends, which are Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre blends, or their, you know, Shiraz is their big thing. South America, Argentina, yeah, so like a Mendoza would be a really, really good guess for this. Depending on where you are in Mendoza, if you're on the valley floor, I would say probably wouldn't get this much acidity, you'd still get really ripe fruit. But if you were, you know, on slopes, I think you could definitely create a wine like this. Potentially New Zealand. Yeah, you know, I've never had a wine as big as this from New Zealand. Not to say that they don't exist. In general, New Zealand is a little more known for like Pinot Noir, like slightly cooler climate than Australia, just because of how they're located with one another. But you're right, it's for sure a New World region. So Australia, Argentina. What about a little closer to home? This wine, especially in Oregon, is a clue, so we're running out of time, can sometimes get a bad rep. Not a bad rep, but people sometimes just eschew it because we're in Oregon and we really like our wines. It's a friendly feud. Any other guesses before I tell you what it is? Or, and also, what do you think in terms of age as well? How old do you think this wine is? Merlot. So Merlot is hard to taste on its own. There's honestly not a lot of people that bottle Merlot on its own, and I can see why you would think that, because Merlot is often blended with fuller-bodied Bordeaux varietals, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, that have a lot of tannin. Merlot on its own is actually fairly soft. It doesn't have a lot of tannin, but your guess makes total sense. Columbia Valley is a really good guess. Southern Oregon's a really good guess. Napa. Umpqua Valley is a really good guess. California, less than 5 years old. Yes. Okay. So this is from Red Hills Lake County, which is one of the newest AVAs at the north end of Napa. I don't think it's technically part of Napa, but it is right above Napa. Could be, what is WW? What am I, not William Valley? No. You're better with full-bodied wines than I am, Noma. Or Russian River. Yeah, Russian River, Sonoma Coast are good guesses, although Russian River and Sonoma Coast are known more for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. What sort of varietals is Napa known for? Oh, Walla Walla. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, Walla Walla would be a really good guess. I think that Walla Walla is able to produce wines with this much acidity. I honestly don't know the region as well as I should. So Red Hills Lake County is in the Mayakama mountain range, which is in, basically Napa Valley is bordered by the Mayacamas and the Vacas. And the Mayakama, it goes, I don't know which way it's flipped on Instagram, but it goes the Pacific Ocean, goes up into the Mayacamas, goes down into Napa Valley, goes up into the Vacas. So this vineyard is perched at the top of the Mayakama Mountains. It's almost 3,000 feet elevation. It's 2,950 feet, which is insanely high. And it is Cabernet Sauvignon. It is 95% Cab, 2% Petit, 96 Cab, 2 Petit Verdot, and 2% Malbec. This is a producer who I really love called Obsidian Ridge. I've known the winemaker since I was a buyer in California, and I just think he's super talented. They planted this vineyard in the early 90s. It was an abandoned walnut orchard, but the soils are red volcanic soils with obsidian all over it, which is, if you've watched Game of Thrones, dragon glass. So it's got these like really fascinating rocky soils because in the Mayacamas it was dormant volcanoes. And even though it's super hot in Napa, we all know the climate down there, they're so high up that it's very extreme conditions. So there's always snow on the vineyard in the winter, but you get extreme sunlight. Very similar to like Mendoza, which as we know is hot, but really high elevation. The main difference would be, in this case, that the soils are so unique. And the cool thing about them, one of the cool things, is that they actually they sort of bought and run an oak cooperage in Hungary, in Tokai, also in the 90s, because they're so obsessed, they're kind of control freaks, and they wanted the toasting to be exactly as they wanted it, and they think Hungarian oak adds this very like subtle, it has less of like the honeyed like cinnamon clove from French oak and more of these darker notes of like toffee, coffee, chocolate, sometimes even a little bit floral. So they make the barrels and they make the wine. This is 2017 vintage. And so for me, this is like more my style of Napa Cab personally. To each their own. But for me, I like that this has big ripe fruit, but it also has a lot of acidity. And this you could age, for 10 years and it would be great. But for someone who wants like a bigger, brighter style right off the bat, you could drink this now. So I wanted to show you guys this because often Oregon locals don't like to drink Napa Cab, but I wanted to show you that, I don't know, there's a different option out there. So, hope you guys had fun with this. You guys are spot on with your tasting notes. We're going to do another blind tasting next month. It's actually going to be on the second week if you missed the announcement at the beginning, because I just don't want these to sit. These held up really well and they were in here for a month, but I just was sort of nervous, so I'm going to do them closer to the beginning of the month. So all the wine is here. I'm halfway through putting the boxes together. So if you're in the wine club, they will be ready to pick up from Tuesday onwards. Yay! And next month is going to be really fun. If you missed the lineup at the beginning, week 1 is 3 wines from the Canary Islands, which is going to be great. Week 2 is a blind tasting again. Week 3 is Tuscany, and week 4 is Grüner Veltliner from Austria, and it'll give us an excuse to talk about the Columbia Gorge in Washington. Okay, great. I wrote down all this information to tell you about the wineries themselves, but we got talking. You guys are getting very good at these tastings. I hope you're using your blind tasting skills on your friends and with your partners and such. Maybe with your pets, just asking them what notes they're getting. In terms of pairing for this, you could sort of imagine like red meat, red meat, red meat. Maybe something lighter than that. This is also, I really love Cab with like blue cheese and aged cheese. That's sort of a fun thing to try it with if you're not a meat eater. Happy Halloween to you guys as well. I sort of normalized the fact that I'm wearing this. If you guys are drinking in costumes, take a picture and tag us and we'll repost it out. Thank you guys so much. Come check out our patio. It's heated, it's covered, it's got little fairy lights, it's super cute. Have a great, safe weekend and safe next week as well. Let's all hope for peace and all that good stuff. We'll be open on election night, especially if you want some takeout while you're watching all the results and stuff. And I will see you here next Saturday to talk about the Canary Islands. It's going to be a really fun one. I haven't been this excited for one of the regions in a long time. That they're not all fun. Okay, guys, have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye.